What is going on, y'all? It's your man EK here, back with another video going over Game 5 of the NBA Finals, where the New York Knicks ended up taking home the championship. They ended up beating the San Antonio Spurs 94 to 90, overcoming yet another double-digit deficit. They were down by as much as 16 points in the game, really behind Jalen Brunson's incredible play. We're going to get to that a little bit later. But the New York Knicks this past Saturday evening captured their first championship in their 50 since 1973, I believe. Been 53 years since they won the championship. So happy for that organization. So happy for that fan base. We're gonna get to all of that. Before I do, you know what I need. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube. It's free, and also go ahead and follow me on IG at coalition.hoops and on X at coalition hoops. So let's go ahead and get into it. So my prediction that I posted Saturday. I had stated that I felt the Knicks were gonna, close out the Spurs on the road, mainly due to the fact that, in closeout situations this year, this postseason, they were winning those games by an average margin of 39 points per game. So I thought, they were going to sort of continue that trend. This Knicks team has shown an ability to not only play very, very well in the clutch, but they've also shown an ability to put teams away when they need to, both in a single game sort of sample size and also throughout the course of the postseason. Obviously, they did it with Atlanta, they did it with Philly, and they did it with Cleveland. And so I thought it was going to be a safe bet that they were going to do it, against the Spurs, who had, I thought, given away a golden opportunity to tie this thing up 2-2 and make it an entirely new series in game four. So with that being said, the game started off, and it pretty much started off the way the first four games started off, with the Spurs really dominating, in the first half, really the first quarter. Some of the things that I really noticed really quickly were that, the Knicks weren't able to really get any quality looks to start the game outside of Jalen Brunson. And we saw that that would, continue to be a trend as the game went on. But, Dylan Harper, was awesome when he came into the game in the first quarter. He ended up scoring 7 straight points for them. Wimmy was also really, really good in the first quarter. He had 3 blocks. He was defending everything at a high level, rotating right on time, rotating beautifully, contesting the rim, really, really well. On time defensive, sort of rotations from Wimmy in the first quarter, you know. And then, like I said, the Knicks weren't really able to get anybody to score outside of Jalen Brunson. He ended up scoring 8 of their 13 first quarter points. He was 3 of 6, 2 of 2 from three, and he started the game really, really well. But the fact that the Knicks only scored 13 points in the first quarter was sort of a harbinger of things to come as the game ended up continuing. But then if we go down in the second quarter, the Spurs were able to open the quarter with a 13-point lead. Wemby ended up getting another block. Really due to the Knicks' slow rotation. Their rotation was pretty slow throughout the first half. It seemed like they weren't necessarily over the emotional sort of toll that game four took on them, coming back down from 29 points, in order to win in the Garden. I thought they were a bit slow-footed, to start the game. And the Spurs really take advantage of that. Once again, Dylan Harper, whenever he replaced De'Aaron Fox and got minutes, he was awesome. He was incredible. You know what I mean? Like, not only on offense, but on defense. He had a sequence in the second quarter where he ended up forcing Jose Alvarado, who was the primary ball handler, into an 8-second violation. And that was just a very minor example of the defense he was playing throughout the entire game. He was incredible. You're going to hear me bring up Dylan Harper a lot because he was awesome. Awesome this game, despite the result, right? But then the one thing that I think the Spurs ended up sort of getting away from was in the first quarter. They were doing a good job, really showing a lot of help, on to Jalen Brunson, even though he was still scoring. They were very good at like sort of showing help, but also being in a position to also get back to shooters if you were to try to pass it. In the second quarter, they just started straight up guarding one-on-one, with very little help, And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that, throughout the second quarter, the Knicks started to get back in the game primarily due to their three-point shooting, right? Like, we got to look at it from this perspective, right? With about 5:46 left in the second quarter, the Knicks, get this, the Knicks were 5 of 12 from three, and they were 2 of 18 inside the three-point line. That just goes to show where their bread and butter was coming from and how they were able to get back in the game in the second quarter. So with that, the defensive strategy switched, right? I think Mitch Johnson said, okay, we got to be able to get out on these shooters a lot quicker. So we're going to take our chances and leave JB on the island with either Stephon Castle or Dylan Harper or Julian Champagnie Devin Vassell and give him pretty much one-on-one coverage, something that he really hadn't seen for the majority of the series, and he took advantage of it. He ended up scoring 8 points again in the second quarter, and he was really instrumental in, sort of dwindling down that 16-point lead that the Spurs had built up to now only being down five, going into the half. It was a 42-37 game going into the half. Very, very low scoring game. Mostly due, once again, I think the defensive efforts for both teams were pretty solid, but also there were stretches where, the Knicks weren't able to necessarily knock down shots and they weren't getting quality looks. And the Spurs, they weren't really getting any quality looks either. Where you got guys like Stephon Castle going 1-10, De'Aaron Fox going 3-13 in an elimination game. And those are like two of your three primary ball handling guys. It's going to be tough, to create any sort of, positive offense. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. But with that being said, man, the halftime score was 42-37, and I thought the Knicks sort of did a very good job staying in the game despite shooting the ball so poorly. And then when we get to the third quarter, a guy who I said in my prediction video was going to be good was Cat. And once again, he was in foul trouble. He ended up picking up his fourth foul on the very first possession of the third quarter, and that pretty much made him, I don't want to say inept, but it basically made him, he wasn't able to play huge stretches in the third quarter because he was on the bench. Because obviously, Mike Brown wanted to preserve him for the fourth quarter, right? And then so when we look at it, when Cat picked up his fourth foul, Mitchell Robinson ended up getting extended minutes, and he only had 2 points, but he had 10 rebounds, and 6 of them were offensive. In the third quarter and the fourth quarter, he grabbed some huge rebounds, in order to really, really allow the Knicks to not only stay in the game, but also ultimately win the game. So I thought he was awesome in the minutes that he was given. And also the Spurs, because Mitchell Robinson was getting the increased minutes, they didn't, implement the hack and mid strategy, which was very surprising to me. I'm not a fan of the whole hacker, player gimmick or anything like that, but I understand it's a respected, well, not respected, but I understand it is a known tactic that teams use to target bad free throw shooters. But I was surprised the Spurs didn't, really exploit that, when Mitch was getting that extended run in the third. I thought they should have done that, and I think it would have sort of helped them out going into the fourth because, once again, right, Jalen Brunson, in the third quarter, he he was awesome. You're talking about getting to the mid range, you know what I'm saying? Getting to the basket, hezzy pulls, you know what I'm saying? Three point shooting, get to the foul line. Like, he was getting pretty much single coverage the entire third quarter. Because once again, I think the Spurs were very scared about, leaving guys like OG open, Landry Shaman, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart. Even though Josh Hart, I believe, hit 3 or 4 threes, on Saturday, but still, they didn't want to leave those guys open because they understand that even though Jalen Brunson is a scorer primarily, he's a willing passer as well. You know what I mean? So I think all in all, he was able to really, really take advantage of the one-on-one coverage because that's something that he hadn't really seen throughout the entire, series. You know what I mean? So, and then there were some plays that I noted, in terms of, just sort of swings in the quarter going into the fourth. One thing I really noticed was the fact that there was a missed, 4-point play on a Wemby closeout on Jalen Brunson that probably should have been a flagrant foul. Now, if we were still playing, that would be more of a story because obviously if he would have gotten one more flagrant foul point, he would have been suspended for a game. Obviously, we'll never know because the Knicks took care of business. But I thought that was just sort of indicative of the sort of the refereeing blunders that we saw in this series, throughout this series. Missing the closeout like that was just pretty ridiculous in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it ended up working out for good anyway. So when we get to it, the Spurs were still up going into the fourth. They still had a lead going into the fourth, mainly because, they had 24 points to 0 points as far as bench scoring. And once again, a lot of that had to do with Dylan Harper. The guy is just, incredible from end to end. He's an incredible defender. He was knocking down his outside shot on Saturday as well. So when he's knocking down that perimeter shot, it creates an extra element of offensive, sort of firepower that he can now exploit teams who really play him, by going to the rim. Because he's primarily a driver, he's a strong finisher. When he's shooting that shot, you got to play him honest. And a lot of times teams will let to leave him open. And when he's hitting that shot, he just becomes more of a threat and more difficult to deal with. And that's what the Knicks were really experiencing on Saturday. They couldn't do anything with him. And that third quarter was more, indicative of that. Every time he replaced De'Aaron Fox or took on the primary ball handling responsibilities while De'Aaron Fox was playing off ball, good things always happen. You know what I mean? But then going into the fourth quarter, both OG and Cat ended up having 4 fouls. You know what I mean? OG, the hero of game 4, the guy who a lot of people thought, was in line to get a finals MVP, didn't really play particularly well in game 5. Once again, nobody really shot the ball well outside of Jalen Brunson in game 5. He had 45 points, and they ended up scoring 94 points as a team, so you can do the math. But yeah, man, I feel like, pretty much for the first part of the fourth quarter, because obviously Jalen Brunson started the fourth quarter on the bench. I thought the Knicks did a good job of trying to stay in the game. I thought they were forcing San Antonio to take really, really tough and difficult shots. But then when Jalen Brunson came back in, with about 8:50 left, he was incredible. I mean, like I said, one-on-one coverage, there was really no help. Like it's probably the least amount of help he's seen this entire series. And he obviously had a play where he took Wemby off the dribble, has a right hand lay. He had one where he ended up taking Devin Vassell and I believe Dylan Harper off the dribble. Wemby was on the weak side. He was about to help. He hit him with a little hesitation. Wemby had to go back to the corner, retreat to the corner, left hand lay. He had a 3-pointer that was just incredible. He had a 3-point play on Stephon Castle in transition, where he ended up getting three free throws. I mean, he had a floater, late in the fourth quarter over Dylan Harper. Like, he was incredible. He was absolutely incredible. You know what I mean? And like I said, he was able to get a lot of isolation opportunities and scored, that incredibly tough, like I said, layup over, Victor Wembanyama late in the fourth quarter, to really pull the Knicks close. You know what I mean? And then, on the flip side, the Spurs, with about 158 left in the fourth, they had missed 9 of their last 10 field goals. And none of those field goals were involving Wembanyama, establishing him in the paint. Like a lot of people had stated that, they need to establish him in the paint more. They did not do that, and it cost them dearly, 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 dearly. And obviously the end of the game was a bit, chaotic, with the missed free throws from the Knicks, namely OG and Mikal Bridges. But, for the most part, I felt like, the Knicks were able to really clamp down defensively on the Spurs, and the Spurs were not able to take advantage of their size, of the fact that Cat and OG were in foul trouble. They didn't employ the hack and Mitch strategy for whatever reason. Just a lot of schematic and strategic errors on the part of the Spurs, which is really indicative of the entire series. Because, in each game that they lost, you could point to, a big blunder from a strategic perspective as to why they gave up the big leads that they had. You know what I mean? But in the end, the Knicks, namely, walked them down again and were able to get the W and were able to win their first championship since 1973. And I, for one, am super, super happy for them. Congratulations to the New York Knicks, your fans, your organization. You guys deserve it. Hand clap. Because y'all deserve it, man. Y'all did what y'all needed to do. Y'all came out and y'all took care of business each and every round. For about a month and a half, you guys were clearly the best team in basketball. I don't care if it's the East, West, North, South. You guys were the best team in basketball, and it was pretty evident to anybody who wasn't biased and anybody who was sort of watching and seeing what was going on in real time. But then we got to really, really look at the flip side. And really the only thing I have to say for the Spurs is that, I think Victor, for as young as he is, I think he likes to play like a guard because he has those guard-like skills. But I think the biggest thing for him is going to be getting in the lab with Tim Duncan, David Robertson this summer, and really trying to build the foundation of a strong post game. Namely, having improved footwork. I think if he has improved footwork, it's going to allow him to be more comfortable with his back to the basket. In the half court. Having counters, having moves to go to, and counters to those moves to go to, as opposed to just using his length, to really depend on his length in order to score in the post without having any really post moves and any strong footwork. I think it's going to be the big thing for him. If he's able to do that, it's going to take his game from here to here real quick. And then really the other thing is that, Dylan Harper's amazing. For about a month, a lot of people, myself included, we've been saying that Dylan Harper is better than De'Aaron Fox. Dylan Harper needs to take his minutes. Dylan Harper should be starting. And I understand De'Aaron Fox is a veteran. He's been here before, 8-year guy. Came from Sacramento. You brought him here for these moments. But, there were too many instances in these finals, really in the last 2 rounds, where Dylan Harper was clearly the better choice, namely because of his athleticism, because of his incredibly sound decision making, and his incredibly sound shot diet. Right, he gets to the rim with ease. He's stronger than anything, and he was knocking down his open shots. And he plays incredibly good defense for a rookie, a 20-year-old, right, in the NBA Finals, playing defense the way he was playing it, solid, hands up, not fouling. Just an incredible two-way player. And if he would have gotten extended minutes, who knows where the Knicks would be? Who knows where the Spurs would be right now? But we'll never know. But yeah, man, I feel like all in all, the Knicks definitely deserve this. When you look at their entire run, not just what they did in the finals, they were a plus 238, which is by far the best plus minus in NBA playoff history. I believe the second best to the Warriors, right? Over their last 16 games, they ended up going 15-1 after they ended up going down 1-2 to the Atlanta Hawks. And then they obviously ended that series by soundly beating Atlanta by 51 points at home. Um, just the way they were able to really play in these playoffs says a lot, not only about, the team, but it says a lot about the coaching staff. It says a lot about the structure of the organization in the front office. It's a team effort at the end of the day. And, I think the front office did an extremely good job, building an atmosphere that, implored Jalen Brunson to take $100 million less money. That way, that way the team could build and get quality pieces to help build a championship contender. And that's what they were able to do. You know what I mean? And he said it himself, the $100 million discount he took was worth it, in order to win the championship, in order to prove a lot of people wrong about him and about the team overall. So overall, man, congratulations to the Knicks. I can't believe, I'm 36, and for most of my life, the Knicks have been bad, or like laughing stocks. So it's kind of surreal to, see them as champions, but that's something that I think we're going to have to get used to, because I certainly don't think this is the last time we're going to see the Knicks in this setting, having a deep playoff run and possibly winning another championship. But when we sort of step back and look at what this postseason was for the Knicks, it was a historic postseason. You know what I mean? And then when you look at the finals, just singularly, Jalen Brunson proved a lot of you people wrong. Absolutely. It's not just about Becky Hammond. There were a lot of other people who said a lot of other things as well. Obviously, Becky Hammond is getting a lot of smoke right now. She deserves it. She deserves it. Because at the end of the day, whether you believe he's 1A, 1B, A1, whatever you want to say, he did exactly what a lot of people thought he wouldn't do. He was the best player on a championship team, going against a team with a guy who's 7'5", who a lot of people already think is the best player in the world, the first ever unanimous DPOY in NBA league history. And he was able to go into that environment and put up 45 points while his team only scored 94 total. He was the only guy that shot even remotely close to 50%. He shot over 50%. He was 14-27. Everybody else was terrible offensively. And the guy on the other side had a mediocre game at best. Mediocre. He had 19 points, 7 of 19. He did have 14 rebounds, which is good. He had 5 blocks, which is amazing. But for a guy who's 7 up was supposed to be the best player in the world, I need more than 7 and 19 in a closeout game at home. That's what I need. And once again, when we look at Jalen Brunson, 14 to 27, he got to the free throw line a ton. Didn't really do a lot of passing, didn't need to because he was getting to his spots in the mid range. He was getting to his pad to pull up jump shot from the perimeter and also from the mid range. He was getting to the line. He was getting to the bucket, left hand finishes, right hand finishes. However you wanted it, he was able to give it to you. And that sort of goes into what I want to say now, which is, Jalen Brunson obviously ended up winning Finals MVP. Well-deserved Finals MVP, might I add, right? And when you look at what he was able to do in these finals, he averaged 32.6 points per game, 4.6 assists, 4.2 rebounds. He averaged 2 steals on 42% shooting and 39% from the three. The reason why I bring these numbers up is that for a guy who was a second-round pick, who then got his break in Dallas, and then you go from being in Dallas to now going to New York, becoming an all-star, becoming the face of a franchise, and you push your team to a limit where now you are winning a championship on the road in 5 games in a gentleman's sweep in your favor, and you're averaging pretty much 33 points per game. I don't care about the efficiency. Yeah, he wasn't very efficient for most of the series. The last 2 games, he was extremely efficient. Game 4 and Game 5, he was awesome efficiency-wise. Scoring the basketball, he was pretty good. Shooting the 3 ball, he got better as the series progressed. But for a guy that's been doubted because of his size, because he's a quote-unquote target on defense, all those sort of things, for him to come through for his team in the biggest moment and pull off something that only one other guard has ever done in NBA Finals history, and that's Michael Jordan, that scored 45 plus in a closeout game, in a finals game for a chance to win the championship. It's very reminiscent of Michael Jordan in Utah. Michael Jordan had 45 points against the Utah Jazz. I believe the Bulls scored 84 points or 86 points, something like that. He scored nearly half of his team's points then. Jalen Brunson did the same thing Saturday night. Same fashion. 3-level scoring, getting to the foul line, shooting the ball efficiently, taking advantage of his one-on-one opportunities in isolation. He was incredible. So anybody that wants to try to tell you and sit up and tell you that Jalen Brunson is not an A1 player, he's not 1A, they're idiots. They either don't know what they're talking about, or they ended up standing on the side of he's not that, and instead of owning up to it and saying, hey, listen, I was wrong, they want to double down on their idiotic opinion. It was stupid then and it's stupid now. And all of you, I'm talking to you, all of you who doubted him, who said he wasn't that guy, who said, well, history is on her side, and Becky Hammond isn't really wrong, and why would she say something like that? She was a small guard. Shut up and apologize for being extremely wrong about a player who, despite his size, has always been able to show that he is indeed an A1 player on any team. And if you give him an opportunity, he's going to push you over the ledge to glory. And that's what he was able to do for the Knicks. So once again, I got to give a big shout out to the New York Knicks, their fans. I know the parade is, I think, on Thursday. It's going to be a zoo in New York. Please, anybody watching this from the New York area, please don't destroy your city. Please keep it peaceful as you can be. Please. We don't need any of that. Enjoy your Knicks. Enjoy the summer. Enjoy the fact that you guys were able to finally win a championship after 53 years. Enjoy it because you guys deserve it. And you guys have an incredible team that's going to be competitive not only for this year, but for years to come. With, in my opinion, the greatest Knick ever loading. He's only been there 4 years. But the more years accumulate, the more he's able to do, the more deep posts he runs. Maybe another championship. Jalen Brunson will eventually end his career as the greatest Knick of all time. And if that ain't A1, I don't know what is. Anyway, Y'all have a good one.